Now, as most of you know, Super Mario Sunshine is one of my favorite games out there. I loved it as a kid and I love it even more as an adult. A lot of the worlds seen in that game are absolute masterpieces and everyone knows about them because of this. However, recently I found out there was one level in the game that we as players never got to experience, even though it looks amazing to say the least. It's a place that is unlike anything we have ever seen, and it's filled with enemies that can only be found there. So which level am I talking about? What can be seen in it? Can you actually reach it? And what happened in the end? Well, let's look into all of this. But first, the sponsor of today's video, Opera GX, a special version of the Opera browser built specifically for gamers that is available on mobile phone and PC. Heck, you can even connect the two for the ultimate browser experience. Now, there are multiple other features that make this browser stand out. For example, it doesn't use up all your RAM and CPU power. So it's perfect when you want to keep many tabs open, not to lose them, but you don't want your browser to hurt your gaming performance. You can even limit the CPU or RAM that the browser uses. But that's not all. You can also limit how much network bandwidth is used by Opera GX browser to gain performance in games and streams. But it gets even better, because they also integrated a bunch of apps like Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, and Discord. And this also goes for music, because you can also access apps like Spotify, Apple Music, and more. So go download the Opera GX browser for your phone and PC right now by clicking the link down below in the description or the comment section. Now let's get on with the video. Now this story starts in the year 2001, before the game was even released. Heck, at this point, the GameCube wasn't even out yet. It was a difficult time for Nintendo actually, because during this period, their home consoles weren't doing so well. Sure, the Nintendo 64 sold millions, but compared to what the PlayStation did, it was nothing. The king lost its crown due to a new Japanese emperor. The only market where they were still winning was handhelds. The Game Boy was still very popular and there was little to no competition. But now that they planned on releasing a new home console, they had to come out on top once again. Now, this didn't happen in the end, but thanks to this mentality, they did try really hard. And so they created some interesting games thanks to this. And one of those was Super Mario Sunshine. Now, when the follow-up to Super Mario 64 started development, the team tried to look for a new element that Mario could use while still retaining the gameplay from the previous game. And so FLUDD came to be when Koizuma first played with the GameCube controller. And that was just one of the weird things they added. There were also a lot of crazy concepts that they didn't put into the game. Just to give you an idea, 10 different types of nozzles for FLUDD were considered at some point, such as scrapped ones that would have resembled fireworks or sprinklers. But they were reduced to 4 because it would have been impossible to put them all in. And they also did this to avoid confusing the player. But this wasn't all. They wanted to create a setting that would invoke more detail than Super Mario 64. And in the end, they went with a vacation theme. Heck, some of the developers even visited resorts in Southeastern Asia to come up with ideas. And so in time, reports of a new Super Mario game started flooding the world of print media and the internet. And in 2001 at Space World, people got to see the game for the first time. And this was the only time ever they would see the early version of Delfino Plaza, the Super Mario Sunshine level we never saw. Now, there are numerous changes between this reveal trailer and the final release, despite it being a year apart. But in a lot of ways, I actually like it more than the one that is seen in the game. So let's have a look at it. One thing that stands out immediately when you see this early version of Delfino Plaza is this gigantic monster. It is some sort of huge, strolling stew-like creature called Hinokuri 2, which walks around the place spawning more strolling stews. This is an enemy that few people have seen in their lives because this footage is old as heck, and the enemy was actually not used in the game whatsoever, but it does still exist in the final game's data. Now, one cool thing about this giant enemy is that you can actually take it out, but doing this is tricky and also very risky. When the top of the enemy is open, you have to get high enough to hover above it with FLUDD. And if you do that long enough, it will some sort of swell up and then blow up. And at that point, the enemy will do something quite weird. Its skin turns inside out, and at that point it runs away as fast as it can. However, this isn't the only thing that can be found in this earlier version of Delfino Plaza. As you can see, the entire layout of the level is different and resembles some sort of port town, and a lot of things are missing, like the market, while a location like the airport seems to be attached to the town itself instead of being a separate area in the game. In a lot of ways, it was very barren and less colorful. A lot of the places that gave the final version of Delfino Plaza character aren't in the game, but that's kind of understandable because it is an early version. Aside from that, there were other things that were certainly interesting, like this little building you could have entered, or this gelato ice cream stand. And then we have this thing that is seen at the top. It seems to have some sort of puzzle attached to it with a wooden board and everything. But again, we have no idea what its purpose would have been. Now, aside from these things, there are all kinds of small things that you can see that are different from what we got in the end. For example, you can see a rather early rainbow goop texture, which is likely an early version of the normal goop. The texture for the water is different and isn't as realistic. The piantas have extremely crude models with high quality textures, and a bunch of other small things. And while these little tidbits are interesting, there are a couple of other bigger things that we should look at, because in the early footage you can see an unused brunette human girl. As you can imagine, this is really weird to see in a Mario game. To be honest, roaming human characters wouldn't be properly implemented until Super Mario Odyssey. And in an interview with Koizumi for Super Mario Odyssey, he said, "Indeed, there has been a similar discussion before. It was planned to include a human in Super Mario Sunshine, which we can obviously see right here." He then said, "Even though we nearly attempted it during Super Mario Sunshine's development, when we discussed it, we made characters deformed from people as we came to the conclusion that we'll stop making realistic body humans." Now, I'm not sure if they ended up scrapping all of this completely or just transformed them into the piantas in the end. But one thing that was clear is that we were going to see actual humans in this unseen world, a bit like Sonic 06. But in the end, they luckily enough scrapped it. But this wasn't the only big difference we can see. Even the earlier version of the HUD looks completely different. It had a counter for a completely new type of coin known as soul coins, which you can see on the bottom left, and they even reference them in a line of unused dialogue in some copies of the final game. For example, a character would say, "The price comes to X amount of soul coins." So this was the first time ever they would introduce special regional bound coins, which is again another thing we saw in Super Mario Odyssey. That game took inspiration from games like Sunshine, and it's clear that Nintendo took the concept of this scrapped currency and included it in their new travel-themed Mario game. But while this is cool and all, can you actually experience this level yourself in Super Mario Sunshine? Well, that is sadly enough impossible. But thanks to efforts from the modding community, you can actually play through it if you download the right ROM and use Dolphin Emulator with it. It was made by someone known as Level Select, who has a channel right here on YouTube. So be sure to check him out if you want to play this version of Delfino Plaza that we never got. But before you do, be sure to check out some of my other videos. For example, the one where I cover the cut content from Super Mario 64, or the Super Mario 64 sequel we never got. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want more stuff like this, let me know in the comments down below. Leave a like, subscribe, click the bell button, help your boy out. If you have any video ideas, leave them down below as well. I do read comments. Yes, I am here. I'm looking at you, big eye. I'm like Sauron from Lord of the Rings. Thank you for watching. Bye. Have a good weekend. Oh, kisses from Papa. Bye.